Hello, people of the internet. I am Andres Perez, aka Kaiji Noir, and here with me is Matt Denian for another film noir discussion. How are you doing, my friend?
Doing fantastic. Thank you for having me on again to do this. I love doing these noir reveals with you.
Absolutely, man, because not only is it great talking to you, but it's also great delving into the world of a genre or subgenre or stylistic piece of film history that you and I cherish very, very dearly. So we are going to be talking this time around about a 1949 British film noir film directed by Carol Reed, written by Graham Greene, starring Joseph Cotten, Valley, Orson Welles, and Trevor Howard. It is none other than The Third Man. So before getting into this, did you had any previous history with The Third Man? Because I personally had not. I wasn't even aware that Orson Welles had been involved in another film noir film other than Touch of Evil.
No, I was aware of Touch of Evil, and I've seen that, of course. But I didn't know about The Third Man. I think this was a viewer request, was it not?
Absolutely, yeah. This was one given to us by a Mr. Sean Barry. So big shout out to Sean for giving us the opportunity to check out this film and for really opening our eyes to a fantastic piece of film noir history. So this is 1949. So this was after the previous three movies that we had covered previously, those being The Maltese Falcon, Double Indemnity, and Detour. And I feel like each of those movies contributed a piece of cinematic, either like a piece of what would eventually become known as the typical film noir style. Like, you know, nowadays when we talked about this in our Maltese Falcon review, when you think about film noir, you think about a certain number of stylistic tropes, from its cinematography to its use of narration to its music to its storylines. And, you know, each of those movies, I feel like we were slowly getting closer and closer to that idea that we come to recognize as film noir today.
Right. Each one, like you said, added a different trope, I guess, to the series going forward, and you could really see them starting to culminate in The Third Man here, I feel like.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like with The Maltese Falcon, we talked about how this was like the quintessential detective story, where a main character, he gets involved in a mystery and he realized it's much deeper than he ever thought it was, all while being mixed up with a femme fatale type of character whose motivations, whether or not her motivations are pure or sinister, we simply don't know. Double Indemnity gave us a lot of that same sort of crime, character corruption, and descent into madness, with as well as the use of brilliant shadows.
Right.
With the Detour, we talked about the use of first-person narration, minimalism, and, you know, a further exploration into the mind of into the human mind as they perform very heinous deeds. And so now we go to The Third Man, and once again we are given another movie that kind of has a bit of a investigator detective spin on things, although we're not really dealing with a detective or freelance, or not freelance, or a private detective. Rather, we are dealing with Joseph Cotten's character, Holly Barnes, a writer. Apparently, according to the dialogue in the movies, he is a writer of Western stories, and taking place in America. And so he moves to Austria, specifically, what was this place called? Vienna,
Vienna.
Post World War II Vienna, to meet a friend of his by the name of Harry Lime, in order to look for work. Because I guess in later dialogue, it is revealed that Joseph Cotten, he is a writer, but I guess he might not be that successful of a writer. He just has like a small yet dedicated fan base.
Yeah, I could really relate to this guy, actually.
I was thinking just that, but I didn't want to say anything.
Yeah.
I'm glad you said it.
No, yeah, he's got a small but dedicated fan base. I could really relate to this guy. And then I thought, I could see Andres telling me, "Hey, man, come to Japan. I've got a job for you." And then this crazy thing would ensue. So.
Right. You'll eventually come over. I'm gonna be already dead, but then and you're gonna hear that I'm part of some racketeering, illegal black market dealings, and then you try to clear my name. Which is,
I'm going to have because as I tell people in every recording, and it just happened again, there's always sirens going off outside your house when we're going to record. I know that the police are after you over there. So,
and the police are going to be as big of an asshole to you as they are in this movie.
Oh, absolutely.
So before we get ahead of ourselves, Holly Martins, he comes to Vienna. He realizes that his best friend since childhood, Harry Lime, is supposedly passed away, and he learns from the
porter.
What was it?
He first learns from the porter. He goes to Harry's house. He's knocking on the door, and there's a porter there who basically tells him, "Oh, you just missed them. They all left like 10 minutes ago." And he's like, "Left?" And he's like, "Yeah, they left. They took the coffin, the box, and they left." And it's basically there that he finds out that Harry was killed. The porter says that Harry was in a car accident and basically was killed right away. Is kind of the first thing told about it. Which did lead to one of the things that I found different about this film, and maybe just because it's older, is that almost all of the secondary characters speak in German, I'm guessing, which made it difficult to follow in some points because there's no subtitles or anything like that. And in some cases, there wasn't even another character there to kind of translate. So you just kind of got like these whole sections in German.
Right. It wasn't until we have the female lead, Anna Schmidt, that we get a character who occasionally translates for what was his name? Holly, yes. Who occasionally translates for Holly. And I do find that interesting in that he is in Vienna, which is like a very unique place for, a film noir story. And I like that he is kind of like the one American there who doesn't speak that whatever second language these other people speak. Because at the very beginning, it's mentioned that the whole entire city since post World War II has been divided into different sections, each controlled by a different country. And so you have this
including the Americans, the Russians, the British, and the French.
Right.
And basically, they all speak a kind of smattered German to get by.
Right. And so we have this one character who is investigating. And so the fact that he is stuck in a country where English is not the most prevalent language, that makes it more difficult for him, and it makes it more easier for anybody with sinister intents to just speak plainly behind his back. So it's like anyone could be an enemy.
Right, which is to say, at first it threw me off in the story, but then I do feel like it helps you relate to the character even better because you're just as lost as he is when there's conversation going on in German where you don't know what's going on either. So it's like you're getting clued in with subtitles or something and he doesn't know. You know as much as Holly does as you get the story with him.
Yeah, it's almost very Hitchcockian in a way where like you know as much as the one of those instances where you know as much as the protagonists themselves. I especially like this one moment where the landlady, she is complaining about some police investigators rummaging through Anna Schmidt's apartment, and so she's talking and complaining, and she makes some it looks like she's making some wisecrack, and she's saying it to Holly, despite knowing that he won't understand. Like something like, can you believe these assholes here?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure if she's saying that, I'm sure that's the equivalent of what she was saying.
That's what I got from the conversation.
Yeah. Or this one instance where this one really bad child actor is like screaming at the top of his lungs and kind of pointing at Holly and making it seem like Holly was responsible for a particular death that occurs later in the movie. And they have a whole mob like looking at him with fear and anger and paranoia. And meanwhile, I'm not really sure what exactly the kid was saying, because what he was supposedly saying and what his face and voice was conveying was like two completely opposite things.
Right.
Whereas, like, the kid is supposed to say, "Oh, he did it. He was behind all of this." Meanwhile, his face and his reaction, it makes it look like, "Dad, look, it's the ice cream man. It's Santa Claus."
Yeah, it totally did. It totally looked like he was like super happy to see Holly, and meanwhile, he's accusing him of murder. It was very odd.
Yeah, it was like this contradiction. That was very distracting. But anyway, so going back to the plot, so after he realizes that his best friend is supposedly killed, he runs into Major Calloway, who is kind of like one of the major oppositions.
Right. Well, he meets him at the funeral. Is the important part.
Right. At the funeral. Yeah, he goes to the funeral. He meets Major Calloway, and he finds out that Harry Lime was supposedly a drug racketeer, and that he was so involved in some shady businesses. And meanwhile, he what was it? I'm always forgetting the name. Holly. It's just not that common of a name for me personally. Yeah. Holly Martins. He realizes that there's a contradiction between what the first witness told him and what Major Calloway told him.
Well, specifically what happens is he first meets a porter who tells Holly that Harry was killed pretty much instantly when he was hit by this car.
And there were 3 people specifically who moved Harry's body from the street to the sidewalk.
Right, he's not told that at first. He finds out about the third person later.
Okay, yeah.
Which leads into like the story as we go forward. So he goes to the funeral for Harry, and he sees Major Calloway there, who I think is a British military person, but he's also like an investigator. And he sees Anna Schmidt there for the first time as well.
Right. He pretty much meets like the 2 major players there.
Right. And basically Calloway takes he offers to take Holly out for a few drinks, and they kind of cut ahead, and Holly's drunk. And you can see Calloway's kind of pressing him for any information he might know about Harry. Mm-hmm. And it's at that point that Holly, like you had indicated, says, he was a racketeer and he's into some bad stuff. And Holly says, "What was it, like gasoline?" He goes, "No." They don't really tell you what it is at first.
Right. So they kind of at the start the movie starts off by making Major Calloway and Holly Martins into enemies. It's like one person won't, like, one character won't tell the other like the full story, so there's like a level of distrust there and hostility. And so Holly, he believes that the Major Calloway is wrong, and that his friend is innocent, and that maybe there was some ulterior motive behind his death. And so he sets out to prove his to clear his best friend's name and just get to the bottom of things. And so at that point we start off this investigation as he meets more and more characters and finds out that this mystery is, once again, just like the Maltese Falcon, more deeper than he previously knew it was.
Right, and this is really a mystery that's super wrapped up in layers as you go through it, which I thought was great about the film. So his next step is Calloway is going to send Holly back to the U.S. on a military plane when he happens to run into a gentleman who, and he purposely says that they're doing propaganda like lectures to help kind of build back up, I guess, the people in Vienna, at least their spirits. And when they found out that Holly's the author, they offer to put him up until he'll stay there to do a lecture. So Holly agrees, which buys him some more time to do some investigation.
Oh, yeah. And it's like that subplot that kind of hangs out in the background until it's brought to its completion in this very strange, like, tonal whiplash.
Right. And you get another quick turn, too, where the front desk receives a call for Holly. And it's this Baron Kurtz, who says that he's good friends with Harry, and he needs to talk to Holly about what had occurred. So go ahead.
No, you can go ahead.
Okay, so Holly agrees to meet the Baron. So they meet, and the Baron says that, he was there, and it was an accident that Harry Lime's driver hit him, and the Baron and their friends helped to carry him to the side of the road, and Harry's doctor happened to be there too, so he was able to pronounce Harry dead. But before Harry had died, he had apparently said to the Baron to make sure basically to take care of his friend Holly for him. But that's where it really starts to become more intricate in that Holly was originally told that Harry was killed instantly by the porter, and now he's told that no, he was alive and was able to pass on this information, basically.
Right. And I have a feeling that Holly Martin's just being a writer, that he was probably someone who was like a very good judge of character. So, someone who probably has dealt with perhaps some elements of mystery in his story. So he's kind of got a very sharp wit about him, to where he's able to quickly find holes in certain characters' stories and contradictions as well.
Right. So he picks these things up very quickly when they come about, and it's through this that Holly asks about the girl who was at the funeral, who turns out to be Anna Schmidt, and the Baron basically, he doesn't know who she is specifically, but he directs Holly to the theater where she works at because she's an actress.
Right, and at that point he meets her, Anna Schmidt, and learns that through his conversations with her that he was actually Harry's lover, and that she was currently mourning the death of Harry Lime, and that there's another subplot that starts where where Major Calloway and the rest of the British police are after her because they find out that she has fake documents. She is actually an illegal Russian alien. So there's they're trying to deport her while he's still trying to buy Anna Schmidt, while Holly's trying to buy Anna some time because he needs her help in getting to the bottom of this. And all the while there's this kind of like romantic tension built between the two as they're both like bonding over their mutual connection to Harry Lime.
Yeah, that was an interesting thread that they put into the story, where I know we keep making the mistake, but Anna particularly calls Holly Harry multiple times, as they're kind of like a little flirty with each other. Although Anna keeps like saying she's not sure she can ever love again now that Harry's gone, and that type of thing. So anyway, it's Anna who goes with Harry back to talk to the porter again, because Harry was having the same problem we were, where the porter speaks very limited English. And it's at the second time they go back to talk that Harry finds out that there was a third person aside from the Baron and this other friend who was there when Harry was killed. And it also becomes, they find out apparently that Anna was told that Harry had some words for her too as he was dying. So it becomes clear that he wasn't necessarily killed right on the spot of this accident.
Right. That's what I really love about this. Like you mentioned before, this is a very multi-layered story in that it's kind of set up as to who could be a potential ally and villain early on in the movie. Like they kind of set up Calloway as like the main antagonistic force, and what was Anna as the main supporting character, like another hero. And this is going to go from here on out. I feel like we should get into spoilers at this point.
You have to.
Yeah, in order to really discuss this film. And so by the end of the movie, I was really surprised that they actually flipped the whole situation upside down, where we know from the beginning that there was some mystery surrounding Harry's death, and that the people who were around him were most likely in on it. So there was already a level of distrust with the Baron and the Doctor and another character.
The Popesco character.
Right. But when it came to the roles that Harry, Anna, and Calloway had, it's all flipped over. So in the end, Calloway is the secondary hero, and Anna becomes somewhat of an antagonist, but not really by traditional means. But by the very end, it's revealed that Harry Lime faked his death, and that he is pretty much as like the lowest piece of scum on earth.
Yeah, that's one thing I really found interesting. One thing about noir films, for the most part, is in some cases you're almost a little bit rooting for the villain because their plan. You can see their motivations. Like in the Maltese Falcon, it's greed, for instance, but the villain's interesting. Harry is just a lowlife in this. Although
it turns out, I would say he's a very charming lowlife.
No, he is a charming lowlife.
Yeah,
but
he's very
he's doing.
Yeah, that's the thing. He's someone who like revels in what he is doing. He shows no remorse for the people that it affects. As it's later learned in the film, Harry is a drug racketeer. He sells like bootleg penicillin, except this is the kind of penicillin that causes severe medical like health complications to the point where it will either kill you or it will drive you insane and causes permanent brain damage. And Calloway, he keeps his information away from he keeps his information confidential away from Holly until he's forced to tell him, listen, I'm not the bad guy here, okay? I'm seeking justice for these poor people, men, women, and even children, okay? This, like, Harry Lime is a piece of shit, and I'm only trying to do the right thing, so help me out here.
Right, and it's basically laid out where he takes Holly to a children's hospital to see the kids that are being affected by this bootleg penicillin. And we need to keep in mind this is almost right after World War II, so the flow of medicines in and out of a place like Austria is severely limited.
So they have to take what they could get, even if it is like very potentially poisonous to them.
Right. Right.
So you start to understand where Calloway is coming from, that he's not the enemy, and that eventually he and Holly have, come to an understanding.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of a neat, like, to use like a wrestling term, like a double switch where you go in where it's like the one person's the heel and the other person's the hero, and then it switches as the plot goes on. But they did it really well in this story.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And I do like how when they go to the children's hospital, they chose not to show, I'm sure because this was 1949, but they chose not to show the children. So the fact that we're looking at these characters' reactions is perhaps even more powerful.
Oh, absolutely. I thought that worked much better than showing like the kids just to see how the characters' faces were reacting to what they were being told they were seeing, more or less.
Right. They mentioned stuff like gangrene, I believe. And let's see, I forgot what was another thing that they mentioned before. Meningitis as well.
Yes, yeah. It's just two of them. Meningitis. I think they mentioned syphilis too, perhaps, and that's why people are going crazy from it, because they mentioned like psychological effects from it as well.
Right. And let's see. And so as for Harry Lime himself, I mean, he's played by Orson Welles, and this isn't like the sad but funny drunk Orson Welles from his later career. No, this is Orson Welles in his prime. And, he's very larger than life. He's charismatic. We mentioned before, like, he's kind of someone who has I mentioned before, he has no remorse. He revels in what he does. It's kind of like it's a dog-eat-dog world. So, I might as well come out on top. He feels like the government takes advantage of the people as much as the people take advantage of each other. So he's just feels the need to do anything he can to remain on top, even if it means like, taking advantage of other people.
Right, and he has this like odd justification he puts out there, where he makes a comparison to, that there was kind of like the Dark Ages where the plague hit and everything, but it was that suffering that gave us the Renaissance. So he feels like he's okay to let these people suffer the way that they are. Right.
Yeah. Actually, I found the line right now. It's like, what the fellow said in Italy. For 30 years under the Borgias, they had warfare, terror, murder, and bloodshed. But they produced Michelangelo, Leonardo, Da Vinci, and the Renaissance. In Switzerland, they had brotherly love. They had 500 years of democracy and peace. And what did they produce? The cuckoo clock. So he's mentioning that, like, he's kind of, that strange sense of justification where it's like, only the best things in life come out of such horrible tragedies.
And apparently that line was ad-libbed by Orson Welles.
Yeah. I mean, I did a little bit of research, and apparently they had a shot that lasted a few seconds too long, so they needed Welles to come up with something on the spot. So he mentioned that he probably took this line from some sort of play or from some other source.
And apparently the Swiss never made cuckoo clocks, just so we don't get blamed for, perpetuating that horrible stereotype.
Yeah. And the fact that they never had 500 years of democracy and peace.
No. We're on point out there, people. Just so you guys know, we're giving you good information.
It's Orson Welles, so anything he says, it has to be correct.
Yeah. Well, they couldn't exactly Google it back then and double check, right? So
there's also this really funny I say funny because in retrospective, because it's Orson Welles we're dealing with, a lot of people mentioned that he did a good portion of the directing in this movie, even though further people have film historians have come out and said no, he didn't do any directing. You know, this was mostly Carol Reed's movie.
Carol Reed.
Yeah, mm-hmm. Carol Reed's movie, because a lot of Orson Welles Wellesian attributes from his previous films are not here at all, or they're here but in like a very minor degree. But still, I can only imagine, you know, Orson Welles. He's like, there's not enough directing here.
Yeah, I could totally see that.
They should. This movie would have been a masterpiece if they let me direct the picture.
I was actually thrilled we got to do this movie just so you could do your Orson Welles voice so much.
Me too.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, like I didn't know much about The Third Man, but I heard Orson Welles, I was like, yes.
Yeah.
And we haven't even touched on Touch of Evil yet.
Yet being the operative word.
Yeah. Let's see. But yeah, anytime Orson Welles is on screen as Harry Lime, it's a huge joy. I love the twist, and I love the reveal of the twist. It's so brilliant, because earlier in the scene you see these shoes that are hiding in plain sight. You know, there's the cat that is apparently only friendly to Harry Lime. The cat goes over to these shoes. This is when Holly, he's at his like lowest. He and Anna are at their lowest point, where they feel like they're just about to give up their investigation, and he sees those shoes. He's like, and he's already been chased by Harry's former associates. So Holly is like, all right, show yourself. And one woman opens the door, you know, from another random building, opens her window, and the light shines clear across Harry's face, and he has this like smug look on him. He's like, surprise.
Yeah.
And, you know, and then he pulls a Batman, you know, a car.
He totally does, yes.
Yeah, a car, you know, drives by and poof, he's gone. And we have this, like, cool, like, wonderfully executed, like, noir. I call it the noir chase sequence, where it's just one person running down a hallway or running down an alley at, like, a tilted angle, which we will talk about in a second. But yeah, the characters are running down the hallway, the alleyway, and then he disappears from sight.
Right, with no explanation at the time, and they have to come back later. So
this changes everything.
Right, because it's at this point, which we got a little bit ahead of ourselves. This is where Holly goes back to Calloway, and Calloway fills him in about everything that's going on with Harry and dealing this bad penicillin. And basically what it comes down to is that there is a third man, and the third man who was there was this character. I got 4 pages of notes here on this. Robert. No, shoot, help me out, Andres. What's the third guy's name? Robert.
Let's see, which character?
The guy who's actually in the coffin.
Oh, okay. It was like Joseph. Let's see. Who was that?
Oh, you're right, Joseph, not Robert.
I don't think he ever appeared on screen, I think. Let's see.
No, but there's a character.
Joseph. Let's see. No, not Joseph. I was going to say Joseph Cotton, but no, that's the name of the actor.
Right. Well, we're killing this right now.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Joseph Harbin.
Thank you, Harbin. Just found it to me. Yeah, Joseph Harbin,
yeah.
Who was worked in some capacity with the military as medical supplier, and he was the person who was giving the watered down penicillin, if you will, to Harry Lime to distribute to the people who needed it.
Right. So it turns out that it wasn't Orson Welles. It wasn't Harry Lime who was hit by the car. It was Joseph who was hit by the car, and that he was pulled to the street by those two associates of Harry, and the third man is Harry himself. Exactly.
And when Holly goes back to Calloway and tells him he saw Harry, they exhume Harry's grave and they find Joseph Harbin there.
Right.
In the grave. So that's one point they realize Harry's still alive. And then there was this really cool scene where they go back to the scene of the chase, and there's this, like, I don't know what you would call it, like a display kind of in the middle of a roundabout.
Yeah.
Or And it's Calloway who notices that there's like a secret door that leads into the Vienna sewer systems down there. And again, these sewer systems were very like Batman-esque.
Oh,
like,
yeah. Very much so.
Like totally like Batman animated series is how like you've got these huge waterfalls of sewers and stuff and stairways and rails and everything else is how this looks apparently under Vienna.
Right. This like whole like catacomb sort of environment.
Right.
It's like a huge maze and it's just nothing but like sewage there, and it leads to like it foreshadows this wonderfully executed finale where Holly chases after Harry, and they're going deep into the sewer. So it's like they're going deep into the pits of hell where only like the darkest souls thrive. And by the time Harry is cornered by Holly, he tries to escape the sewers. He tries to rise up above, almost like trying to rise into heaven, but is denied entry into such a place.
And there's another, to make a Batman comparison too, which I thought came up well, was that they flip Holly basically, where, like you mentioned before, that Anna is going to be at least deported, if not arrested, for being an illegal citizen and having falsified papers. And when Holly's kind of like dealing with Calloway about he's going to help him take out Harry, Calloway says, "What's it going to cost?" And because he's falling for Anna, Holly works out a deal where Anna will be sent somewhere safe where she won't have to worry about facing jail time and stuff for what she's done. But kind of what occurs is, as Holly can't but help himself when Anna's being shipped out, he goes to see her. Anna notices him, and so at that point that she realizes basically that Harry's still alive, and Harry is not going to, give himself into this kind of trap they had set up. But the interesting part to me, and this is where the Batman comparison comes back in, is that Harry is very kind of indifferent to Anna, despite the fact that she's head over heels in love for him. Right. And no matter what he does, she only sees like the good part of him and refuses to believe anything different, even when he does crappy stuff to her. It almost reminded me a little bit of like a Joker Harley Quinn situation.
Yeah. I was thinking of, as you were explaining that, I was like, oh yeah, this is very like Joker Harley Quinn, and it's like it feels like a one-sided relationship, and Harry just sees Anna as just like another tool, another means to an end, and going so far as to be the one who pointed out her false documents to the government.
Right.
In order to drive attention away from his supposed death.
Right. And doesn't fill her in about it or anything like that he's still alive and well and whatever else. And she's pretty devastated by the fact that she thinks he's dead. Like we said, she says she can never love again. Holly kind of like tries to make a move on her, and she flirts a little bit, but for the most part, she's very kind of cold and just shuts down because he's not Harry.
Right. Yeah. Right. And so Holly tries to reach out to Anna, but Anna refuses. Knowing that Harry's still alive, she still wishes to be with him. So it's a huge battle of loyalty versus morality.
Right.
Where Holly. He tries to do this, he initially doesn't want anything to do with it, but, upon seeing those children in the hospital, he's like, okay, he wants to do the right thing. Meanwhile, Anna, she, gives into her selfishness and to her heart's desire and tries to look out for Harry's best interests.
And to the point, we'll get to it, but I thought that all that tied together in a fantastic ending scene for the movie, in my opinion.
Right. And it kind of goes into the strong tradition of film noirs where they have like very like bittersweet endings where no one comes out of this like 100% like intact. Everyone loses a little bit of themselves by the end.
Right. But we shouldn't get ahead of the chase scene you talked about. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's okay then. Let's see. Anything else to get into besides let's see. Although there is this nice little scene where the what's his name? The boarder?
A porter. He's a porter.
What is a porter?
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with that term.
Oh, kind of like the guy who would just carry your luggage to and from a hotel room, more or less, when you went there.
Okay, sorry about that. So
that's okay.
The porter, there's this moment where he has a change of heart and he decides to give more information. At first, he's very hesitant about telling Holly any sort of information related to Harry Lime's supposed accident. And by the time he decides to have a decides to have a change of heart, and he arranges to meet with Holly to give him all the information. At that point, he's killed, and it's a trope I've seen many times where you have this person who has this guilty conscience, and by the time he kind of has a moment of redemption, he is killed before he can enact that act of that good deed.
Right, it's a classic snitches get stitches type of thing for a noir film. But that's the scene you were talking about earlier where the porter is dead on the street and there's all these people gathered around him. And Holly and Anna walk up and that little boy just basically starts yelling something where we don't know what he's saying because it's in German. But basically,
and he's a horrible actor.
Yeah, he's terrible, that kid. Screw him. And
he should have had me direct the kid. I would have told him what for.
But it basically turns out that he's claiming that for whatever reason Holly had killed his character, which further pushes Holly to flipping on Harry because now he's maybe implicated in the murder of his porter as well.
Right. So, and it reminds me of this thing I wanted to bring up. So we talked a little bit about the style of the movie, and I'm not sure if you want to get into the technicals now, or do you want to talk about the ending, or you want to say that for now?
I think we'll finish the story and then go back into the technicals. What do you think?
Okay, sounds good enough then. So let's see, anything else story-wise you want to bring up before going into the ending?
Basically, I don't think so. Just maybe want to make it clear that was Holly had basically reached out to Harry and said he would come work for him, which sets up this sting operation that Calloway put together, right? Right.
And by the end, the Anna attempts to ruin the blow the sting operation, which leads to that big chase sequence where Holly is chasing after Harry, and the British police are chasing after the two of them, and shots are fired, bullets are exchanged, and we end up having Holly who corners a bleeding Harry. And at that point, Harry, realizing that there is no escape, kind of gives a subtle nod to Holly, giving him the okay to put him out of his misery, rather than having his friend rot in a cell for the rest of his life. So in a way, you can tell there's that sense of friendship between the two of them, because despite them being at their lowest, being them at these like complete opposite, being completely opposed to each other, there's that moment where they feel sympathy for each other, where it's like, one friend begging to another friend, please help me escape this, please.
Right. And like, there's a great scene where after Harry's shot, he comes running through the sewers in a really cool chase scene. He comes to a stairway that he's trying to climb, even though he's shot. But when he gets to the top, there's like a grate there, and you see his fingers kind of go through it, like he can almost, reach his escape. Or because he's dying, I think you made the illusion too that like he's, trying to reach heaven, and it's just not going to happen. He's just denied from it.
He's stuck in the sewers where he belongs.
Exactly. And then off screen, we hear a shot, and then we see Holly walking back out through the mist towards Calloway. So we don't actually see him shoot him, but it's certainly led to believe that that's what occurs.
Yeah, I can only imagine that if this was also another part of another aspect of the censorship of the 1940s, because at the very beginning of the movie, we're given this like old school British rating system saying that this movie has been assured that it is for an adult audience. Kind of similar to how we would see a movie and it's saying like rated R for a restricted audience. Right. Yeah. Even though, again, nowadays this is all pretty tame, but like the subject matter itself is quite, how would you say, provocative for its time.
Yeah. Well, like we said, even we felt like it was a little bit disturbing when we found out that he was selling bad penicillin to sick kids. I mean, I had a hard time thinking of like, kind of a more horrible thing that somebody could be doing. That's pretty high up there, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And then we get to that cool end scene we were just talking about, right? So we should probably go over that now.
Right. So it begins just as it appropriately ends. Oh, it ends as appropriately as it began, where it started with a funeral of Harry Lime, and we end with the real funeral of Harry Lime, and we have what felt like it was going to be a Hollywood ending, where it's like the main hero wants to stay and comfort, to not console, but to comfort the leading lady, and maybe there's this hope that the two of them can reconnect and engage in a legit romance this time around. And so the main the Calloway says, you're crazy, and he's like, yeah, I'm crazy, and I'm kind of known for that sort of thing. Or yeah, he's known for that. So he kind of makes a light jab at himself, and so he's waiting for the girl so that they can walk into the sunset together. But she ignores him and walks off, leaving him to feel a little depressed. In a way, depressed that he wasn't able to do anything for her, but at the same time, at least now he has this conscience that at least he tried to help her.
Right. Specifically, he's on his way to catch a plane, and he decides to skip the plane in
the hopes of being with her.
Right, and he jumps off, and it's kind of an extended scene, but it works well, where he's leaning like close to the camera, and she's far down the street, so you see her walk all the way down, and then, like you said, doesn't even look his way when she walks past him. Mm-hmm. Because basically she was angry with Holly, even though he had tried to get her set up with a better life, that Holly had sold out Harry earlier in the play and in the story. Right. So that's kind of where that,
and the fact that he legitimately killed the man she loves. True. Yeah, so it's just that it's very difficult for her to get over that, even though Harry was morally in the wrong. She's at that point too far in. Her love for him is just too much for her to handle. That sort of. I guess that's sort of bad news.
Right.
Yeah, where it's like she still loves him unconditionally, even if he was in the wrong, and so she still kind of has that bitterness and hatred towards Holly.
Right, and like you said, I thought it was a perfect bittersweet noir type of ending where the good guy doesn't end up with a girl. She just walks past him and moves on.
Yeah, all he can say is that he has a clean conscience, but at this terrible cost. It's kind of like sometimes doing the right thing will not always lead to the happiest of endings.
No,
because that's just the sad world we live in.
Right.
And that is like the embodiment of film noir.
I was going to say, exactly, right. That's what film noir is. And I think that's one of the reasons you and I like it so much is that it's not a fairy tale type story.
Yeah.
What's going to end. So it was a fantastic story. And then like the cinematography and the score and the background music and some of the settings were all great. If you wanted to get into those now, I think, right?
Yeah. Oh, I did want to mention a bit of trivia where this was adapted from a screenplay, which was originally written as a novel by, Graham Greene. And Graham Greene initially wrote a happy ending, like Hollywood-style happy ending, where after the woman, after Anna passes Holly then chases after her, and they then walk side by side into the sunset before Anna then grabs onto his arm.
I think the ending worked much better with her just ignoring him, and like you said, him being like, I gave it my best shot. Clear conscience is all I can ask for at this point.
Right, exactly. And the thing is, like, the director, Carol Reed and the writer Carol Reed and Graham Greene. I wish it's like just like Holly and Harry. I wish they didn't have similar names. They were fighting with each other on like the ending, but eventually the director won in the end, and for the best, I think.
Oh, I totally agree. I thought that was a fantastic ending. Which, to me, a noir film needs a good ending like that. Like we talked about how great the Double Indemnity ending is. I thought this was right up. So.
Yeah, that whole thing is like, what was it? I love you, Mac. I love you too. And, then fade to black.
Right.
There's that level of uncertainty there, that kind of like lost aimlessness. It's like, oh God, where do we go now? Where do we go from here? And
right.
Even with like Detour, where, the main character, he's off on another series of unfortunate events, or with the Maltese Falcon, where it's like, well, we got the criminals, but I lost the woman I loved.
Right, right. And then that's one of the best things about noir films is you're not going to necessarily get that happy ending. You're going to get somebody who does the right thing, and sometimes life still sucks. So, you know,
Absolutely.
and in this case, Holly's left in a foreign country with no job, no money. He already missed his plane, and the girl left him. And in the meanwhile, he took down this horrible crime boss and gets nothing for it.
Yeah, yeah.
But his legion of fans from his books still love him, even if they're small. Damn it.
Very true. Let's see. So going over into the technical aspect, one thing I wanted to talk about is the music, because this is one thing that is like really caught me by surprise. And at first I didn't know how to feel about this. Even now, I'm still on the fence about it, because, this was done mostly through an instrument. A lot of the music, they decided not to go for what was popular at the time, which was like big orchestral scores, especially, if you listen to something like our first two movies of Double Indemnity and The Maltese Falcon, big booming scores. We're not quite there at the jazz, portion of the history of noir. No, rather this one goes into something that is very much in the style with the setting, which I believe is very appropriate, because this movie is all about Vienna and the culture surrounding post World War II Vienna, and so a lot of this movie is made through a stringed instrument known as a zither, and apparently the third man's theme song is also quite popular outside of the movie, and it's also very somewhat cheerful and bouncy, and I keep thinking of SpongeBob anytime I hear that theme.
Oh yeah, I can see that. I hadn't thought about that, but you're right. And it's not just in the background, like it is loud. They use it a lot for transitions, particularly early in the film when Holly's walking from like spot to spot. Mm-hmm. It's like booming loud over the movie as he's going to it. I mean, we've talked about people before who we think should have their own, kind of like soundtrack as they walk. And this was definitely Holly's with the zither, like really in your face. Mm-hmm. And like you said, I'm not sure how I felt about it. Like at first
for me it just like clashes with the more intense chase sequences. Like there are there's maybe the one moment was when he was being chased by the mob that thinks that he was responsible for the porter's death. And he's being chased like do 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 do, and I was like, is this supposed to be for comedy or something? And there was another part where he was being chased by the two goons. Harry's goons, and then he's chased into this room. He sees a parrot. The parrot bites him. He's running off. He's hiding among like this rubble, which I suppose was probably destroyed in World War II.
Right.
And again, you hear that like that zither music, and it's like kind of distracting, almost takes away from the mood. And maybe that wasn't the intention, but maybe in a modern day context, I'm just thinking, my mind just keeps going to SpongeBob.
Well, I had to think about this for a while, because like I said, we took a lot of notes for this film because there was so many twists and turns and plot lines to throw you off that the more I thought about it, I wondered, like, did they use this like oddly cheerful, loud music to kind of create dissonance with the scene to throw you off even more as a viewer? But then I thought maybe I'm thinking too much about this. I'm not sure. Maybe they just like to zither. But I mean, what did you think? Because it really is offsetting compared to the tone and the film and the visuals of what you're seeing.
Let's see. So, just going by. No, let's see. I'm just looking at the Wikipedia article here. So this could be like, complete, take this with a grain of salt. This could be, nonsense. According to Guy Hamilton, Reed met Karras, but Karras was the composer of the movie. By coincidence, at a party in Vienna where he was playing the zither, Reed brought Karras to London, where the musician worked with Reed on the score for 6 weeks. Let's see. The picture demanded music appropriate to post-World War II Vienna, but director Reed had made up his mind to avoid schmaltzy, heavily orchestrated waltzes. In Vienna, one night, Reed listened to a Weingarten zitherist named Anton Karras, was fascinated by the jangling melancholy of his music. Let's see. Another person stated, what sort of music it is, whether jaunty or sad, fierce or provoking, it would be hard to reckon, but under its enthrallment, the camera comes into play. The unseen zither player is made to employ his instrument much as the Homeric bard did his lyre. So maybe in a way this is supposed to be like a performance piece. Like, so the director mentioned, not the director, the director, Carol Reed, he met the zitherist at a winery. And so maybe it's kind of like, maybe it's one of those things where, you're at a restaurant, you're watching a show, and you're listening to a musician as you're watching the show, or maybe the musician is the show. So, or you're going to a play and you're looking at, there's, back in the day, there's an orchestra playing while you're watching the movie. So maybe it's like, in a way, this tale that someone is telling, and there's a zitherist playing this music to accompany the tale at whatever club or winery that you are playing at. Or this also reminds me of the opening narration, where the narrator was the director himself, Carol Reed, and he's very jokey, very
right. Yes.
enthusiastic. Yeah. He's like, "Oh, Vienna, I've never been there before World War II, but oh, it's such a very interesting place. The place is divided by all these different countries. Oh, and here's this very interesting story I happen to know about."
Right, but it was talking about like, oh, and some people have to be racketeers. Some people aren't so good at it. And you see like a body just floating in the river, like going. So
it kind of sets the tone for this, So maybe this is just a person who knows about this as this like omniscient, omnipresent narrator who is like, here's this interesting tale about a couple of people who made some bad choices, and he makes light of it. It's almost like maybe he's like God, and God is like laughing at these people, and maybe that's where the zither comes in, where it's like it kind of plays it up, this sad story, to almost a very comedically tragic one.
Right. Yeah. That could be it. It does kind of work, but I just.
Yeah, it's just the one thing I'm not all that enthused with. It doesn't detract from the movie at all, in my opinion. It's just like a small annoyance, It's like a small little, like, you have this beautiful house and there's this one chip of paint on this wall. It's distracting, but if you look past it, the rest of the house is beautiful.
Right. I'm trying to think of a good comparison to make. So maybe this would work for the people listening. So we talked a lot about like comparing this to Batman. So to use like Batman the animated series, whenever the Joker was on, and we'll go back to him, they had that like do 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 do, but it would kind of work because the Joker's like very colorful and animated, not just like literally animated, but animated in his movements when he talks. That Mark Hamill did them. But in this film, it would almost be like they would take like the Scarecrow and apply that same music to him when he was on screen, where it's just like. It just doesn't work. Like I don't know why like they're playing this happy music to this somber and scary character,
And that's the thing. I'm not sure if this was meant to be a lighthearted music, because nowadays it feels lighthearted, but I'm not sure if it was lighthearted back in the day.
You could be right. Like the SpongeBob comparison is very apt to the way when you put it that way. So,
for instance, a lot of songs have kind of changed in their meaning over the years. I mean, we had some great songs like from the likes of Beethoven that have been like gone to public domain. We would see stuff for like, let's say like Beethoven's what was it? I keep forgetting if it's just like what number symphony it was, but like da 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 da.
Okay,
it's supposed to be like very big and dramatic, and yet you hear that song used so many times for like the silliest of ideas, silliest of commercials and whatnot.
Right.
Yeah. So
slapstick type manner.
Yeah, yeah. So I've seen like, maybe it's like perhaps it's just we're part of a generation where that style of music has kind of changed its meaning over time, and it's kind of unfortunate if that is the intent. If the intention was to make it serious. However, there are moments where the zither music does work really well, mostly with the very tender love story between Holly and Anna, and there are moments where it does work to build suspense when characters are, you know, conversing with each other. You know, there's a heated argument, or there's a chase sequence in which the zither is played very intensely and does match the tone of the scene. And there's portions where there's no music whatsoever, such as the finale, where you just hear the sound of water gushing everywhere. And the music works also.
I thought one spot where the zither worked really well is as the cat is approaching the shoes you had mentioned that turn out to be Harry's, where it's almost kind of like Jaws, like as the cat takes each step and the zither kind of builds a little bit till he gets to the shoes, and then there's the Harry reveal. I thought it works well there, but there's the chase scene in particular for me stuck out as like, this music does not fit this scene.
Mm-hmm.
No.
Yeah. So, yeah, I would say there's only like 2 sequences in the whole movie where it didn't work for me. But overall, it wasn't that much of a problem in the end.
No, it didn't like ruin a movie or anything. It was just odd.
Yeah. Let's see. Another thing I wanted to talk about is the lighting. So this movie has been noted for its use of harsh lighting, in which rather than having like a series of blacks and whites and grays, you just have a lot of lighting where there's a lot of bright whites and a lot of dark blacks, very little in between there. And this is where I feel like we're starting to reach the black and white stylistic quality that we've come to know of when it comes to film noir. We've had a movie like Double Indemnity play around with the shadows.
Right.
We had like the Maltese Falcon, which I believe we mentioned before has none of these stylistic, none of the visuals of what we know as film noir, just the story itself. We talked about Double Indemnity creating the style of the shadows, especially with the mini blinds. We talked about Detour, which didn't really have any of that due to its low budget. But here it's like we feel like we have an evolution from the use of shadows from Double Indemnity, and here it's like in terms of like the coloring, where it's, you know, harsh, contrasting blacks and whites, and it's a very gorgeous movie to look at, especially during the night sequences. I mean, it's already beautiful enough with all the Vienna scenery. Where you can tell there's a lot of like architecture, there's a lot of art, there's a lot of beautiful history to this city, but at night, you know, it just really tickles my fancy, for lack of a better term.
No, you're totally right. The lighting at night, and in particular in the sewer scene at night, is fantastic, where like there are some really brightly lit spots, and then there's like the dark, and Harry Lime is dressed totally in black. In fact, before we got on, you and I were kind of saying it's ironic that Orson Welles, who voiced the Shadow famously for a while on the radio, was almost dressed like the Shadow in this story with his black. But I think another point real quick, Anders, about the city and contrasting the light and the dark is that I guess for that time frame in particular, Vienna worked really well, where you do have this like beautiful architecture in a lot of scenes, and then right next to it you have like something that's just demolished and just in rubbles from the war, which I think worked out well too, to kind of make that contrast. We had like the light and the dark lighting, but then you had like beautiful architecture next to just devastation, right?
Right. It's almost kind of like just as contrasting as the the beautiful scenery with the rubble, with the destroyed rubble, almost as contrasting as like the blacks and the whites, the good versus the evil, the intense situation, and the lighthearted music.
Right.
So, and there's portions where there are certain shots where characters, their bodies are covered in shadow, but their faces are clearly revealed. Or there are portions where characters are running down an alleyway, and the characters there's this like bright light surrounding a black silhouette around the character.
Right.
Almost like a light at the end of the tunnel sort of deal.
Which that effect was used a lot, that light at the end of the tunnel type of thing in the story. I feel like, especially with the end scene or not the end scene, with like the last chase scene we had talked about, right?
Oh yeah, very true. There's also this part where where Holly first chases after Harry, after he sees that he's alive for the first time. As he's chasing Harry, we don't see Harry physically, but we see his shadow, like, sprawling, like, literally the shadow itself is running across the side of the alleyway. And it kind of reminds me of a scene similar to that in Who Framed Roger Rabbit, where Judge Doom is running away, and you see his shadow on the wall. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're right. I can totally see that there.
And they also do the whole thing with the light at the end of the tunnel, black silhouette running away from the camera sort of deal.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, by the way, people, we're definitely going to review Who Framed Roger Rabbit in this series at some point, right? Just put it out
there. Eventually.
Not passing that one up.
No, of course not. Especially for a couple of goofballs like us who enjoy our Saturday morning cartoons growing up.
Darn right. Yeah, it's a thing of the past now, unfortunately. But as kids, I was there every morning.
Yeah, I was there. You kids today with goddamn YouTube's and your Netflix cartoons. Back in our day, we had to wake up at 6 a.m. with our bowl of cereal waiting for the next episode of Ninja Turtles to show up.
Yeah, it was a big day when we got a Betamax in the Denian household. I'll tell you, we could record some of those.
You don't know how great it was to be able to go to church one day and then come back and have your copy of Digimon recorded on VHS. Oh boy, those were the days, I tell you. You had to preserve that episode. You couldn't just record the 20 episodes back in the day. No, sir. You had to keep that episode and don't tell your parents you wasted another one of their blank VHS tapes. Why, back in my day, I had to record over my parents' wedding videos. I did not, by the way.
I did something similar to that, actually, but that's a story for another time. Yeah. There was a big intercontinental title match in wrestling I had to see, and I grabbed the first video I could find, which was a family video. My mom was still not happy with me about that. But anyway, our audience doesn't want to hear that.
You should bring that up the next time you see her. It's like, hey, Ma, you still mad?
Yeah, well, she's a lot of stuff for like that. But anyway, we should let's focus on a video for your audience. What did you think of this movie overall? Because I'm interested to get your overall opinion. Not like final credits, but
we didn't talk yet about the Dutch angles, which is another thing this movie was popular for.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, sorry, yeah. You're right.
So funny enough, this was kind of
you said angles, not oven, right?
What's that?
Dutch angles, not Dutch oven.
Right.
Okay, just making sure.
Let's see. Although they could be Dutch ovens could be open at an angle.
Anyways, true.
This was something that was kind of somewhat criticized back in the day because people were like, why is everything so off balance? And nowadays it's, another staple of film noir. It's another staple of like expressionism, being able to have this kind of sort of distortion, kind of warping your senses by showing everything at an angle. And I think that it causes this level of visual distortion causes a sense of discomfort for both the audience and the scene, letting you know that the trouble is up ahead. Almost kind of like it's the cinematic equivalent of like a spider sense or, Spider-Man's Spidey sense.
Right, yes.
You feel like something bad is going to happen, such as we first see the Dutch angle, I believe, when Harry is when Holly is talking to the porter about Harry Lime's death. And so when we focus on the porter, someone who knows the truth, he has a Dutch angle. When he's when he's trying to drink his troubles away from trying to drink his troubles away while he's talking to Major Calloway, it's a Dutch angle. When he's meeting Baron Kurtz for the first time, Dutch angle. Meeting Anna for the first time, Dutch angle. Interviewing witnesses, interviewing the doctor, we get a Dutch angle. So, like, every time he meets a suspicious player in the game, we get ourselves a Dutch angle, on top of having the more intense chase sequences also be Dutch angles. In fact, there's this comic book artist, I forgot his name, but he made this brilliant poster. I'm not sure if it's like a fan poster or not, where it's like the scene of like, the alleyway at a Dutch angle.
Oh, it's not ringing a bell for me. Sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. I mentioned that we had this brilliant poster made like after the movie was made that kind of focused on that like famous Dutch angle.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, by a particular comic book artist. Let's see. I really want to know who was this person here. Francavilla. That's his name, supposedly. Let's see. I think it was like Federico Francavilla. Let's see. Are you still there?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Oh, yeah, Francesco Francavilla is this artist, and he made a number of fan posts. I'm not sure they're fan posters or not. They look. I'm not, or maybe these were officially commissioned posters, but he did so of showcasing the film's very iconic Dutch angles. I guess for those who don't know, who may not know what a Dutch angle is, it's essentially when you you tilt the camera on its side, not completely on its side, but just at a slightly tilt it, and you got yourself a Dutch angle.
Right. It's like a 45-degree angle, kind of, right?
Exactly. No, 45, maybe a little less than 40. I guess 45-degree would be like an extreme Dutch angle.
Okay.
But I would say they can be there can be like quite a variety of them, and I just shared with you that poster showing off the iconic Dutch angle.
Yes.
See, basically, if you've ever heard of this horrible movie called what was it called? Battlefield Earth with John Travolta. The entire movie is shot on Dutch angles.
Right, which is a good example of that you need to use that technique sparingly and not for the entire film.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, and there's also, it's used for that tonal whiplash where Holly, he's being carried off in a speeding taxi car, and he's like, "Hey, I didn't tell you where we were going," and you think something bad is going to happen, only to find out that this taxi driver was driving him to that like book club sort of event that was built up for. And so, there's such this tonal whiplash that by the time he's arrived at this meeting, it's at a Dutch angle, because he's all confused, and he's like, "What oh yeah, I forgot this was even a thing."
Yeah. I forgot that was the thing too. Is one of the things about this movie that I wanted your opinion on actually was there was so much going on. Now it worked, but there's so many like small details to pay attention to. I found myself often rewinding scenes just to go back and make sure I didn't miss something, because it was very subtle or very quick like that, to the point where I'm sure I'm not the only one. I kind of forgot that was the thing he was going to do a talk and thought he was getting kidnapped, right? Which I think happens to a lot of the viewers. You kind of get lulled to sleep by that. But
I guess I do like that because it's trying to constantly keep you on your toes and keep you guessing as to what's going to happen next, as well as subverting your expectations.
Right.
Yeah, especially for a Hollywood movie where most movies around this time were pretty cut and dry, which is a reason why film noir, the genre of film noir has left such an impact on people nowadays, because it subverts everyone's expectations and goes down paths you never thought Hollywood stories would go in.
Right, like we talked about the kind of changing of the characters, where the people you think are the heroes at the beginning, except for Holly. Holly's pretty stable throughout it, and the people you think are the villains, like you kind of first think that Harry's a victim and Calloway might be a villain, but by the end you see that Calloway's a hero and Harry's a villain. But it's a long process to get there, of like twists and turns.
I will say that there is one thing I've noticed, and that was when, for a while before we meet Harry, we end up meeting a lot of his cohorts, like Baron Kurtz, the doctor, and that other guy. And what?
You go ahead. Sorry.
By the time we meet Harry, all three of those characters disappear from the movie, and we never get a proper resolution as to what happens to those characters. Although I can assume that once they caught Harry, maybe Major Calloway was going to go after those three guys next.
I think there was a quick scene where Holly goes back to see the doctor and the Baron, and he kind of makes a comment that the police are on their way. right before the sting operation is set up. They get those two, I think. But the other guy, kind of like the mob boss guy, the Harry's enforcer, the Pepesco character, there's no resolution.
Yeah, the last time we see him, he actually chases after Holly.
Right, and there's no resolution to what happened to him.
Yeah. It's kind of like as soon as Harry is properly introduced in the movie, then the whole entire movie focuses on him because it's at that point it's revealed that he's the one behind it all.
Right. Although to be fair, Orson Welles plays a tremendous villain in the story, so you are kind of fixated on him when he came on the screen. At least I felt that way.
True. Yeah. You don't even think about the other characters at that point until after the fact.
Right.
Yeah. So you were right that there's so much going on that you could end up forgetting certain pieces here and there. In fact, there was this one detail I almost forgot about. I didn't even notice Anna referring to Holly by Harry's name, only because, again, their names were already similar to begin with. But I almost missed this, where she is sleeping while wearing Harry's pajamas, because you can see there is an HL embroidered in her in those pajamas she's wearing.
Oh, I didn't notice that either. Okay, I'll go back and check that out.
Yeah. I do like how there are quite a lot of intricate details set in the background that aren't given a full, how would you call it, establishing shot.
Right, which is again just another great thing about noir films. They do stuff like that, and this one in particular did it really, really well. I think it's going to be the one that have to go back and watch multiple times to catch everything that happened through it.
Mm-hmm, so. Right. This definitely has a movie with a lot of rewatchability, and I'll be sure to return to this movie time and time again in the future.
Yeah, absolutely too. Thanks again to Sean for pointing it out to us, because I've now gone out and downloaded it and everything and purchased it. So can watch it whenever.
I know this movie was released on Criterion, because for a while this was public domain in America only. But I believe it's no longer under public domain. Now the rights have been secured by someone else. So I'm not sure if those old Blu-rays are still in circulation, or are still being are still in distribution, or are still being distributed. So but if I can, I do want to get my hands on a Criterion copy of this movie. So yeah, I think now would be time to get into final thoughts. So yeah, this was a movie that had provided some very interesting commentary on the state of Vienna back in post-World War II. It's a very interesting climate, very beautiful, on top of the wonderful cinematography, lighting, very bizarre yet intriguing style of music, on top of these great characters, this memorable detective-esque story, brilliant villain, and a very unforgettable ending for this to cap off this brilliant example of the genre of film noir. So yeah, I would give this movie another 5 out of 5. This is just another clear-cut classic. There's a reason why this movie has had the reputation that it has had over the decades, why it currently has a 99% on Rotten Tomatoes, I believe. So I would say this is one of those movies like The Third Man, Double Indemnity and The Maltese Falcon. Is a movie that deserves all the praise and attention it has gotten. Either that, or maybe I'm just one of those people who likes to buy into what the majority thinks. Or maybe I've been brainwashed by my film classes to brainwash me into thinking what a proper 99% film, 5 out of 5 film should be. Yes. But I don't care. Sure. I still enjoy it.
Yeah, I maybe not as brainwashed as you could. I went back and forth in my head between a 4 and a 5, basically because of those weird quirky things we talked about, with the music and stuff like that. Although the more I thought about it, I think I'm going to end up giving it a 5. You said, it's still really great. So I think a 5.
And I think those quirks will end up only benefiting the movie for helping it stick out amongst other film noir movies that have come out in the decades since The Third Man.
Right, and that's one of the things I think that did push me over to giving this a 5. Like you said, the villain is fantastic, the story is great, all the actors do a tremendous job, and I wouldn't say that those things were bad. They were just kind of quirky, but the more I think about it, the more they made them stand out. So that's why I would give this a 5 as well.
Absolutely. So definitely check out the third band when you've got the chance. So to wrap things up, I am Andres Perez, aka Kaiju Noir. He has been Matt Danian. So where can people find you, Matt?
At MatthewDenny.com and on Facebook as Matt Denny is my personal one, I always say, and Matthew Denny is my author one. I'll be glad to see you on either one of those two.
And you can be sure to check out our ongoing charity campaign, Kaiju vs. Cancer. We did an entire podcast covering that, so you can check that out. You can follow the Kaiju vs. Cancer Facebook page for all the latest information. And you can go, simply search Kaiju vs. Cancer Custom Ink to find our charity campaign, where you can buy a shirt for yourself or for the people at St. Jude Children's Hospital if you still want to donate without actually owning said shirt. Although I would highly suggest it, considering the great amount of art that we have now, both now and in the near future. So,
yeah.
Yes, as I stated before, I am Andres Perez, aka Kaiju Noir.
I'm Matthew Denny.
And until next time, everybody, take care.